Call the regular monthly meeting of the Park Board, Board of Commissioners, Tuesday, January 14th at 5:31 p.m. We're going to do a slow rollout of this meeting because Jeff Gunkelman's running a couple minutes late, but I think by the time we get to anything that we need to actually do, we'll stall out until he gets here. So we'll go to the first item, approval of minutes of the previous meetings.
Actually, you know what, I do need Jeff, because they're under the director's report, the last line, Yelker Farm is misspelled. It says Yanker Farm.
Okay. Is there any other comments on that?
Unless, Clay, you know of a Yanker Farm you've been meeting at that we don't know about. Well, you know,
Maybe it's a new
new
facility.
reputation.
Yanker's Farm?
Can we move to approve the motion, the minutes with the annotation that will correct the spelling of Yonker Farm and pass that on to Jeff when he gets here?
Sounds good, so moved.
Okay, second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, minutes are approved. We'll skip the December bills. We'll approve the order of agenda. Mr. President, or Mr. Interim Executive Director. Mr. President now. You don't want to be called President. People.
No changes, Mr. President.
Okay, no changes.
Move to approve as presented, please.
Second.
Moved and seconded on the order of agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. So Jeff, welcome. We knew you were coming late, so we approved the minutes with one annotation. Under the director's report, the last sentence, Yonker Farm, is misspelled. So you want to correct that. And we moved and approved items 1 and 3. Let's go to item number 2, approval of the December bills.
Move to approve as presented.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. Any discussion? Jeff, pull the board.
Commissioner Papacek?
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs?
Aye.
Commissioner Deutsch?
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson?
Aye.
Commissioner ROSTAD?
Yes. All right, item number 4, recognition of audience. I don't see any foreigners. I don't see any outside people. We can recognize the staff that are here. Welcome. We'll move to item 5, director's report. Mr. Leker.
Excuse me, Commissioners, we do have 3 items on a director's report, and I will cover the first item, which is the Depot Hardscape project. Past couple conversations we've had at facility meetings is that we have been looking at relocating our administrative offices out to the new sports complex. This is all contingent on the sports complex moving forward. The city did open up bids for the second phase of Main Avenue this year, and unfortunately, we included our Depot Hardscape in there, and that came in 3 times as high as what we had expected. So I guess what we would like to do as staff is just keep working on the contingency or the plans that if the sports complex moved forward, the administrative offices would move out to the new complex, and then instead of using $300,000 to replace the Depot Hardscape, which is what we were going to contribute to it, we also had $100,000 of DOT money to replace the ring around, and about $50,000 to $60,000 in construction easements and permanent right-of-ways that the city would purchase. So our proposal is that we'd save that $300,000, we'd put that towards the relocation of our offices, and then just do the minimal maintenance we need to keep the brickwork, probably have to do some concrete work out here in front of the Depot Hardscape, and just continue on that basis until the time that we actually decide to move forward with bids, get the shovel in the ground, and then we would look at putting the Depot property up for sale. So that's kind of our recommendation moving forward, and that would be our update related to the Depot Hardscape is we do the minimal maintenance. We've had troubles in the past getting masons in here to do that type of work, and our carpenters have done some of that. I think we'd still look to try to get a mason in here, professional mason, and try to take care of it as best we can this summer. So if you have any questions, myself or somebody can help answer.
Any idea what kind of cost just to dress that up, even if we would go above and beyond that? I mean, it's the front door of the depot. And you can put a Band-Aid on it, but if you're going to sell it, I mean, have we thought about doing anything a little bit more?
Well, I
Not
think,
going full-blown with the plaza and everything that we were doing, but it's in really tough shape.
I mean, that's one thing we could look at. Tyler Kutchner is a landscape architect, and as part of that, we could look at seeing if there's some limited stuff we can do. I think the brickwork and the footings are probably gonna have to stay the same same as they are, but we could look at something that might be able to dress it up a little bit.
So, go ahead.
No, just if we're willing to spend that money.
So the idea is that we would refuse the hardscape portion of the phase two that affects us. They're gonna go ahead with obviously their phase two, and we'll work around with coming up with a plan for dressing up the.
Yeah, I think the
front. Is that right?
DOTs, what they would do is they'd go in there, remove the ring around, they'd put a sidewalk in there, they're probably working with Tyler, we would figure out what we want to put down there, if it's some stamped concrete to match the banding that we have here, and do it as a limited thing there, and then possibly, Commissioner Papachek, we could add something into what they're doing and just coordinate with them and maybe dress it up a little bit. I think we want to keep, whatever improvements we do, I don't know if we want to go much above that 75,000 give or take, or 50,000 give or take, kind of depends on what we can get by with. When we talked about doing this depot hardscape and the possibility of any possible future sale, one discussion that came up was, well, do we want to recreate that depot hardscape, and then we end up selling it, and somebody comes in and goes, well, that doesn't fit our use. We did one redesign, we opened up some of the upper tier plaza space for that, but, so I think we could dress it up to make it look better, but you just don't know if we do put it up for sale, who the next, tenant would be. But we can definitely look at dressing
That's
it
about
up.
the number I was thinking of too. I think put a little bit of money into it. We've been putting it off knowing that this is going to happen, and now that it's not going to, rather than just put a Band-Aid on it, maybe look at going a little bit further without
Yep.
spending a ton of money.
Yeah, and Dave mentioned, over this past month or so, there are two sewer lines that run directly to Main Avenue. And it just coincidentally, they both plugged up relatively the same time. The one on the west side that runs under this building is totally collapsed and unusable, so we had to do a retrofit down there to get the sewer from this building through the crawl space over to the other side. And then the other sewer line over there was collapsed, but we got it snaked, we got it opened. So those are two items that we'd have to replace or repair next year as part of the tie-in to the new Main Avenue project. We also have the chiller. That is a two-stage chiller. One stage went down. We're looking at getting prices on that to replace that chiller too. I mean, we'll keep the facility in as best possible shape and up and functioning as possible before the sale.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that if there are things that, I think about if I'm selling my house and the furnace doesn't work, obviously I'm gonna have to put in a new furnace. So, I mean, if there are things that, a potential buyer is gonna come in and go, well, you gotta do this, or, we might wanna think about some of that, and if the thing's already ripped up in front already, maybe we need to think about that.
Yeah, the sewer lines will get repaired. The chillers, I think in that 100K give or take range. So depending on what we want to spend on the front, we could be looking at $150,000, $175,000 out of that 300. So.
Okay. Anything else on that one? Go ahead.
No, I'll turn it over to Dave for the Lindenwood Master Plan update.
Thank you, Mr. Leker. I just wanted to update the commission. We talked a little bit at the last facility meeting about the lower road portion of the Lindenwood Master Plan project. At that time, I inaccurately said that we needed to wait for a state water commission permit. We still need a state water commission permit, but we only need 30% plans in order to apply for that said permit. And it's pretty much a given through the contacts I've been talking with at the city of Fargo that once we apply for that, we can still carry on and do our construction, and that permit will catch up to us. It's usually about an 8 to 10 month turnaround for that permit. So there is potential. Initially, I'd said at facilities we probably wouldn't be able to do anything down there this year. There's potential that if we can get the road alignment appeasable to everybody and kind of go off of what our ideas are there, just to update that is we're trying to keep the new lower road, if you will, at a flood elevation of 25 feet and higher. That's to get us out of all the nuisance floods and, just make life a heck of a lot easier down there, which we talked about, I guess it's over a year and a half now of before when we were talking the Lindenwood project. So I just wanted to update that. That was some new information that I got some clarity on. We're going to continue. Right now, we're working internally as staff on the road design. Timeline, I'd still like to do some public input sessions, not necessarily just pertaining to the road, but of the overall amenities in Lindenwood Park. I think we all agreed last time that, this is one that we definitely want some public input and be able to get their perspective for certain of the adjoining neighborhoods, but the community at large as well. So what I'm thinking is that potentially in February or early March, we would hold those meetings. And we can get you more information as that and ask for, if there's specific things and structure of how you folks would like that as we move along here. But I just wanted to give that update. We're going to continue to try and find a path for that lower road that'll keep us out of the floodway, that'll mitigate some of the tree impacts down there, because we know that's a sensitive thing when we start looking at some of the mature trees there. And also, kind of replicate what we do there, but it's going to be a shorter road. And just to get as much as we possibly can to meet all the needs that we've outlined previously.
So when I hear the word permit and then I hear 30% design is all we need, how do you know that for a fact that they won't come back and say, something's disjointed here, we're going to have to back up and do something?
There's that possibility, but I'm relying on my colleagues with the city that do this quite regularly, and they've agreed to help us through this process, so they will be shepherding us through the permitting process. And there are several projects that the engineers there have said that this is how we go about it, and it's just they think it's attributed to the backlog of work that the state level has, and it just takes that long for them to get through all the different projects throughout the state. And, I think working in conjunction with the city engineers is going to help us in that regard, just because they do know this. This is what they do routinely. And so that's where I'm taking the lead from. But I agree there is always that possibility that, and if we can get this permit in the next 3 to 4 weeks, let's say, there's a good chance that, if we do plan a construction time in October, which I'm thinking, or mid-September, there's a possibility that we could still have that in hand by the time we start.
And I think their big concern is just, the layout of the road, where it's gonna be, and then just to make sure that we know that the cuts have to match the fills, and we can't import any additional fill in the river floodway.
Yeah, in October will be right after the red goes to low flood stage, right?
So is our plan with Lindenwood, and I think the last time we talked, it was going to be that we were going to have a plan, maybe with some options, maybe 3 different plans that we were presenting, as opposed to going to the community and saying, what would you like? And you never know what you're going to come up with.
Exactly.
Is that still the thought?
Yeah, I think that's the best way to go about it. I know there was some thought the other way that you described, but I definitely think that, we go armed with what we think our best 1 or 2 options are as far as things, and then go and show the community that these are the amenities that we've thought of as a group, and we're certainly interested to hear other input and things that we may not have thought of, and really get some good discussion going, and take all of those ideas and then kind of bring them back and refine them, and then bring it before the commission and say, this is what we've come up with from staff knowledge and expertise and the community involvement, and hopefully we can all come to an agreement on this is an overall project.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think it's always easier to react to something than it is to have a blank slate and go, what are we going to do here? So,
Absolutely.
anything else on Lindenwood? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Another part of the executive director's report is giving you an update on Edgewood and the clubhouse and where we are at with finding a tenant. Since we last met, we have put some Facebook ads out there. We had a nice article in the forum, and we've had 7 interested calls. After visiting with them, 5 have come in for a tour. again, time is of the essence, and so the staff has asked that of the 5 that toured, if they're interested, that they would provide us with a proposal tomorrow by the end of the business day, so that we would be able to help work through weeding to the top candidates, and then that would allow them to put a little more effort into their proposal, get it on our facilities committee meeting at the end of the month, so that again, if we can come to some terms, they can start working on getting a license for the beer and liquor, and also look at remodeling and those kinds of things. And so at this point, we're waiting to see of those that showed interest, who is going to propose and what they're going to propose.
Did you tour Mike McFeely through there? Because it kind of sounded like it was all about him, so.
I talked to him on the phone. He wanted burgers and beer. That's all we agreed to.
Yeah, Carolyn and I talked earlier before the meeting, and she's excited about a couple of the options, so that's good. At least a couple.
Yeah, that's great news.
Anything else on Edgewood? More directors' reports? Before we go to, are you going to do foundation, Brian? Yes, sir. Before we go to foundation, I should have at the recognition of audience. So a couple of new faces in here tonight. Dave, do you want to introduce Thad and
Yeah, Commissioners, with Greg Sobel's retirement, Thad Swanson directly to my right, and then to his right is Andy Noah with the Nillis Law Firm, and they'll continue our attorney services with them, and we do have an agenda item coming up later that we'll
And Thad has
discuss.
sat in the meetings before, but I've never met you before, and then we started corresponding here recently on some email stuff, and so now I got a face and a name together, so welcome both of you, so. All right, now, foundation report, Mr. Brian Arrett.
Sure. There is a foundation meeting on Monday, so the 20th, and we are going to have the foundation board meet at the ROSTAD Center in West Fargo. Depot's kind of busy on Monday. There's lots of activity going on here. And we thought it'd be good for them to do a little walkthrough. You know, it's a beautiful complex. Not exactly like us, but similar, some similarities. But we thought it would help to give them some ideas of what we're looking at. Also on the agenda, we're going to review the grant match proposals that we have received. 2 have come in. And there's a third that supposedly is coming in today, which is after the deadline, so we'll have to talk about that and whether we want to accept a third proposal after the deadline. Other than that, at the foundation meeting, of course, we'll give them updates on the project and where we're at in all aspects of the project. We have continued to have meetings with potential sponsors, some potential larger gifts, and are going to keep working on those, of course. I'm happy to share more information, but can't really share names and that kind of stuff in a public setting because we need to be respectful of their privacy, depending on how they decide to be a part of this project. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer any questions.
It's probably been quite slow since we last met because of the holidays and everything else, so.
A little bit, you know, but we had a really good meeting last week with a good possibility, so we'll keep moving.
Excellent. Any questions for Mr. Foundation report?
No, but while you have the microphone, did you want to do your Meals on Wheels plug? Because I see you're looking for people.
We're always looking for help delivering Meals on Wheels, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, around the noon hour. If anybody's interested, takes about an hour of your time. We have 4 different locations in Fargo and West Fargo. So anybody out there that wants to deliver Meals on Wheels, call us, 293-1440. Thank you, Commissioner Dawson.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. Moving on, item 7, board to consider for approval and award construction management at risk services for the proposed Fargo Sports Complex. Dave Leker presenting.
Thank you. Yes, agenda item number 7 is consideration for approval of the selection committee's recommendation for construction manager at risk services for the sports complex. As everyone knows, we discussed it at the facility committee meeting in December. For RFPs, we did receive 5 proposals. Krause Anderson is out of Minneapolis. J.E. Dunn is out of Minneapolis. Mortensen Construction has a home office in Minneapolis, but also has a local office. McGough Construction is based out of Minneapolis and also has a local office. And then the fifth proposal was received from Gertz Construction Services, who partnered with Gas Construction in town. So those are the 5 proposals we received. On our selection committee, as per North Dakota Century Code, the selection committee is made up of an engineer, an architect, a contractor, and then the owner. So for the architect, we had Mark Hansi with JLG Architects. For the contractor, we had Trent Duma with Earthwork Services. For our engineer, we had Tony Uckel with MBN Engineering. And then I represented the owner, myself. So that was our selection committee. We also had a couple ad hoc committee members that were there to assist. Tyler Kutchner, who was our project manager in-house here, he had some good questions. Phil Seek with Sanford. And then we also had Todd Mead with JLG Architects too. And they weren't there to score. They were there to ask questions, follow-up questions, because they are the experts in their areas. So we did decide to interview 3 firms, which was Mortensen Construction, McGough Construction, and then Gertz and Gas Partnership. We interviewed those 3 firms, and I think as we said in the offset, if we would have picked any one of these 5 firms, they all would have been able to do a fine job. Same goes for the 3 proposals that we decided to interview. Every one of those companies, firms, could have done an excellent job. They've got great projects around the state, around the region that are very similar, and they've accomplished them very well. So basically, we couldn't lose with this. After our interviews, though, and our selection committee, we did have a scoring rubric that was based on several items. Just to give you kind of a background on that, similar project experience was 20%, key personnel was 15%, workload and availability, just because a lot of these contracting firms are busy, is 15%. Safety record was 5%, familiarity with location 5%, fees and expenses 15%, compliance with state and federal laws 5%, estimating and scheduling 15%, and then management 5%. So we did base our scoring on that criteria, and after we interviewed the 3 firms, our recommendation came down to McGough. They have been working on the project through Sanford previously and doing some of our schematic estimation and helping with constructability on a lot of how it would be constructed, whether we go with precast panels for the turf area or do we go with a pre-engineered metal building. So they've helped out a lot with that, and as a committee, we just felt based on those criteria, one advantage with McGough was, since they do have that familiarity and preliminary experience on the project, there was no fee associated with any additional design work until we decide at the time we're going to bid the project and start construction. So, I mean, that's a big thing for the Park District. Wasn't the only thing. In talking with them, they do have a local office here. They've been here for several years. They are currently the construction manager at risk on the Block 9 tower. Their whole Fargo office is based from local employees. They didn't, it's not like they imported a bunch of people into the area. These are all local employees. One of them being Shiloh Beecher, was one of our Park District carpenters, who now would be an assistant superintendent on the job. So they just have a great team. They put a great foot forward, and we feel it'll be a good project with them. So, I do have some information here if anybody wants to look at some of the criteria we based our selection on, but from our selection committee and what was presented in the facility committee meeting, we would recommend moving forward with McGough Construction Services. So if you got any questions, I'll be more than happy to try to answer them.
Give us an idea of the fee structure. I mean, there was really nothing in the packet, and I wasn't at the facilities meeting, but, I mean, where they are with McGough, and if they were pretty much in line with the other ones, or how that all shook out.
Find that.
And then you said with them, there's no fee until we say it's a project and we start the project?
Yeah, right now there won't be any. We've already worked ourselves through the schematic phase. Now they're working on the design document phase. So that'll take us probably the next 2 to 3 months, and they'd work through construction documents. So until the time that we pull the trigger and say we're going to bid this project out, there wouldn't be any additional fees that the Park District would be required for. So
So have there been fees up to this point?
paid through Sanford, yes.
Okay.
Yep. And I guess when you ask for proposals like this, they all come in a little bit different. Mark Conzi with JLG tried to compare apples to apples as well as possible. So just kind of a reference on what the total fees would be for this project through construction. And this is based on the initial proposals. J.E. Dunn came in at $4.2 million. Kraus Anderson came in at $3.94 million. Then it was Mortensen at $3,483,000. McGough at $3,240,000, and Gass and Gertz at $3,105,000. So those are kind of the comparison on fees for a project of this size. So, and you know, general conditions, construction administration, those are little things where, you know, Mark Hansi had the expertise in that and tried to clarify things for us. So if you look on here for or McGough, yeah, percent total of design work, it's not required. Some of the other ones that don't have the previous experience had, for example, like to get through, pick up where we left off in schematic design, through design documents, through construction documents. Just an example is J.E. Dunn would be $150,000, Gaskert's $45,000, McGough, no fee required, Mortensen $75,000, and Kraus Anderson $68,000. So that's kind of the range of what it's going to take for the next design through construction documents. And then the big cost is just building the project and administering the project.
So tonight, are you looking to award or then to go into a contract with them? Because we haven't seen a contract, so I think part of that is saying, McGough, they're the ones.
Yeah, I think.
And then a contract will come back for.
Yeah, I think what we'd be looking for is a motion to award services to McGough Construction based on us reviewing the contract with our legal services. Based on what their proposal states.
Any other questions or comments?
Well, I appreciate the thoroughness that you guys did in going through that. I'll make the motion to award the construction management at risk services for the proposed sports complex, Fargo Sports Complex project pending contract,
Legal review.
as presented.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Jeff, pull the board.
Commissioner Papacek,
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs,
Aye.
Commissioner Deutsch,
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson,
Aye.
Commissioner Rosted,
Yes, the motion passes.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, David. Sticking with Dave Leker, board to consider request from Verizon Wireless to locate a cell tower at the Coliseum property. This was before us once before.
Or twice.
Or twice.
Yeah, this one reared
Still remember your phrase,
reared its head again. I don't know how far you want me to go back and pass history, or do we just want to review their latest counter offer?
I think we all know it.
I'd say you can start with what the current offer is.
Okay.
That's my thought. We have the past here if we need it. It's very.
Maybe
it's
Andy
actually quite
needs to
vivid.
know what's going on.
So
To be
anyway,
fair, though, to clarify that the rebuttal offer you have right now is the same as our counter offer to them initially, except for it's 1% less escalator, because according to them, they aren't allowed to, corporate will never agree to them.
they said they would go with the $1,500 per month rent with a 2% escalator, not a 3%, which our counter offer was. And then when we initially said the $1,500 a month, they wanted to increase that space for additional tenants on the tower, which they've reduced that back down to the original smaller footprint. So I guess, yeah, in all essence, that's what it is. $1,500 a month with a 2% escalator and then the smaller footprint of 29 by 24. And just for comparisons, we did check, Tyson did some checking on the two towers currently on Park District property. Jack Williams is $1,000 a month with 3% escalator. And then the tower out at Anderson is $600 per month with a 3% escalator, plus additional revenue if they should add any additional tenants.
So both of those are 3, and are either of those Verizon?
I'm not sure exactly on the carrier on those.
They've
But if you look at
they've
3%.
never done anything more than 2.
Yeah, and I'm not sure on that.
They're
They
not
just said,
allowed.
they said their board wouldn't go for 3, but
So, you mentioned one of those, the stipulation if they add carriers,
that is the one at Southwest
and
Anderson
we would get additional,
revenue.
yep. And is the plan that we would set it up the same way with this one?
Right now, with the size of footprint they have for their cabinets, it sounds like it's only one carrier right now. Because when we talked about the $1,500 initially, they wanted a bigger footprint, so they could add additional cabinets in there for additional leasees.
So you could put it in there, it's just unlikely that it'll happen, but it would prevent them from doing.
I think if they came back and said they wanted to add somebody, they'd have to renegotiate the terms.
Okay.
Or I think we put that provision in the lease, if we approve it
I think so,
tonight.
too. I agree.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, I wanna, it's hard to see on these pictures in the site plan, so if somebody could just explain to me. So I see where what I believe the concession stand starts. You can't see it on this one. Let's see, go
It's the
to-
brown roof.
Go to the pages before the photographs are not helpful for what I'm yeah, so here. So I think that existing building in the top left,
Yep.
that's the concession stand building, would that be
Correct.
right? Okay, and so what's the dotted? Yeah,
That would be
what's
a-
that? Is that the existing sidewalk, or is that what you'd put in?
I think that would be their lease area, and then they would need a driveway to access their cabinets. So I'm guessing the concrete would show new concrete up, widens out, and for whether that's turning purposes or not, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just like a driveway pad
Yeah,
or
just a
whatever
driveway.
that would run alongside that concession stand, and then.
Yep. And the one thing to note here too, I mean, this site plan would have to move to the north a little bit because we have our new water main, when we remodeled the Coliseum, goes right into that corner. It'd be the very southwest corner of the pad for the tower.
Move your hand down, yeah.
So right,
A little
no,
to
a
the
little left, right there. That's right where the water service comes in. So this would have to get adjusted to the north.
And the rest of that will still stay green space,
Yep, correct.
under the trees and, okay.
So are we leaving enough green space? I mean, it's a 25-year commitment, and I think we're all sensitive to this. I mean, it's, neighbors don't like, and it's away from the neighborhood, but I don't know that area enough, and is staff comfortable? I don't know how we use it. Is there enough green space for people that would still use it? I think their counter took up a lot more space. Now we're back to the
Yeah.
original.
We talked about that at facilities, and, you know, because I said, you know, we're about parks and green space. Are we doing the right thing? But, you know, I think, was Dave maybe Beats that talked about the fact that if you look at the landscape there, there's light towers already, so we're really not having an impact that's gonna be out of bounds.
I mean, the one problem, I mean, when you look at trying to place cell towers in a urban setting, the only places that are really available almost anymore left are parks and green spaces and schools is kind of a taboo right now. If you go down to Minneapolis and stuff, you see them, you know, in those areas and along the schools and everything, but I think they're really having a tough time trying to find a place in North Fargo to place a cell tower. As everybody knows, as part of the Yonker Farm covenants with the federal government, they had to take those towers off that tower up there. So they're just trying to help North Fargo. So
I guess I've heard that some of the hockey players use this area to play in between games and go outside there, and then all of a sudden we're just taking that away. And I don't know how much they use that.
Well, my experience has been more with little kids who are watching their siblings play ball on that ball diamond. And there's a lot of little kids that will play there because their family will literally be watching the game right there, and there's no other green space for those little kids to play. So this, depending on how big and the concrete piece takes it away. I wish I had a.
Aren't there huge
I wish I
evergreens
could
there
see
too?
Yeah,
There's some there, and Commissioner
I could
Dawson's
see
right,
how
it's
big
more
it
in the
is.
summer months where it would be impacted. If there is an impact, because in the winter, it's just, if you were to drive up there now, it's just, area where it's all full of snow.
So if you go to the pages, sorry, Dave, two later, like, go there. Yep, now make that big. If you
Just go
can't,
to
well,
the
maybe you
plus
can't,
minus
but,
up there.
so you can see where the ball diamond
To
is.
the right, to the right.
And there's literally nowhere else for a
All right,
kid,
right, right, right.
there's nowhere else for a kid to play who's not playing the game. So if you have siblings or toddlers or anybody else, that's the spot that they play. And they don't, you know, they don't need to be throwing it 400 yards or 100 yards, so they don't need a lot of space. And I can't really exactly remember how, if they actually play all the way up to the, I don't think they actually make it that far in, toward, right next to where your hand, the hand is on there. But that'd be my only thing, is that's the one spot where there's green space. And is there a reason we go there versus anywhere else? Can you put it on the south side of it?
I think that was probably a recommendation from when I met with them up there, is trying to tuck it out of the way. I mean, I don't know if, I mean, could they possibly put that on the south side? Possibly. You'd have to have a driveway, access driveway up to there then.
One of the other issues other than the driveway is the amount of snow that we get and the snow removal out of those exits.
Sure, you have to,
South side of that building.
yeah, you have to clear
You know,
that.
there's, you know, Jason has mentioned about trees that are in that, you can't get bigger equipment to remove a lot of that snow that comes off the road.
Because of course where your hand is on the screen, that used to be the parking lot.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but they block off that alley for baseball games, correct?
Yeah, there's a fence that runs right where that hand, your hand just went, yep, they put up a fence and a gate, so that's the other nice thing is, those kids are really kinda, just a good spot for them to play, and
I'm glad you said that, because I was gonna bring that up too. That's
yeah,
probably
there's
not
no,
the- That's not
no,
the safest place.
no
to go
cars
with
going
those
through
cars
there.
driving through.
Yeah, they put up a
So,
gate.
zoom out some, and I see another green space, that if they don't go there,
So go north a little?
yeah.
That's probably.
So up in the right
Is
corner.
that
Well,
school
we did
land?
Is that a strip
That's
there? That,
School
We did talk
property.
with the school district, and they weren't in favor of putting anything on school property, just with,
or where people, if they don't go there to throw, and that's a better place to throw it anyways, isn't it?
Well,
outside
but
the fence
again,
if
we're
they go-
talking 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds, and their parents are watching the game. So that's the reason they picked the spot they do, because they're little
well, the
kids.
reason they picked that spot was I probably.
I don't mean Verizon, I mean the kids.
Oh, I'm just saying, but if you just flipped it on the south side of the lobby, I mean, is that an option for the commissioners? Right there.
That wouldn't bother me one bit.
I mean, you would have a driveway probably going out to the east of the parking lot.
For the tower?
Well, no,
I'd
you
rather-
could put the tower, you could basically just take that footprint, move it down and rotate it 90 degrees to the right, and then the tower would be there, and your driveway they'd have to have a driveway from the parking lot to get up there.
I'd
It's a
rather
little
have the
more-
tower more in our back door than the
Yeah, that's
front
what I
door.
mean.
Yeah.
It's puts it a little more.
I guess I just want to be careful that we're not doing this, and then come baseball season, we're gonna have baseball families saying, well, you took away the only green space we had.
We also think those kids will be catching in the alley or the road going.
If it's blocked off. Right.
Well, that's what they-
You think they will play back there, you think?
Not where there's.
I know
not where
what
there's
Vicky's saying,
asphalt.
those are bleachers right there, behind, behind the backstop, then there's street, and then there's that green space, and that's where, people are sitting in the bleachers watching their kids play, and the younger kids are on that grass right behind them, and I don't see them necessarily going down and into that alleyway over there, but
The
whatever.
kids also play here because the ball doesn't leave this area.
Uh-huh,
It
Yeah.
bounces off the wall and they don't have to chase it.
uh-huh, and it doesn't
Yeah.
roll down the road, and,
Yes.
I mean, there's still.
Well, if it's gonna- if it's-
Driveway,
And there's no
still
windows to
there
it.
play
Right.
there. I mean, they'll still have that. It'll be moved
I-
north a little bit.
it would be, I'd like to know how much green will be, because on our picture, of course, I mean, you can see it here, but I don't know if we have a measuring tool. Because there may still be enough, they're not playing really anything big, it's kids just, it's little guys just, I mean, they're probably using a space as big as this room.
Well,
So
and,
if we still have that big of a space, I don't think it's gonna be a problem. But I can see when we start doing something, people are gonna go, You taking away the only little spot we got?
What does our staff feel? And people that spend time there with baseball families, are we creating an issue where you're gonna get a bunch of calls if we do this?
I think there's still enough space, because again, when you look at the map, the fence doesn't extend past here, and so then you have still half the space. You know, half of it will be fencing and a tower, but you still have the other half of this green space.
Which there'll be some trees, but.
Right, and that trees will be another issue.
What's the address there? 1700? No, it's 17th Avenue, right?
17th
Do we know
Avenue
the
North.
address?
Yep, 17th Avenue North, yep.
There's a measuring tool up there if you want.
That's what I was gonna do.
That little ruler up there, Carolyn.
Here,
Oh.
You drive.
you drive.
Oh, what'd I do now?
You were gonna add something, Dave?
Well, yeah, I just look at it and I mean, I like when we find sources of revenue, so don't take this the wrong way necessarily, but I kind of, you know, like the comment too, that is this our business? And, you know, so that's where I come from. I love that. I think we could easily make it fit here. I think it would blend into the landscape. That part I'm okay with, but I think for me, it comes down to that bigger question is this a park district responsibility? And so that's where I stand. Like I say, I don't want to necessarily see us turn away revenue. I think that's, you know, it's nice to get that. But then on the other side, I think there's a lot to be said for, there isn't a lot of green space there. And I know it sounds like I'm fence sitting, but to me, I would lean more towards that we don't do it. And, you know, I know that might be in disagreement with some of my colleagues here, but that's my standing.
29 east-west and 24 north-south, is that what we're thinking? So, it takes you to about to the end of the building, 29 feet. And then, it takes you almost to you can't really see it on there. Depends on how far you have to come out for what the water that you said? You said there's gonna be a water?
There's water right in this
Access.
corner.
So it won't quite, it'll be 15 feet shy of where the end of the building, before the concession building starts. I don't know how far you can zoom in on that thing, but. And the grass itself goes to the sidewalk to the east, goes 75 feet from the building, and about 80 feet
I thought that was measured.
the other way.
City GIS pulled up.
Yeah.
The other thing to consider is, this is mainly gonna be during the spring. As Dave mentioned, the high school games and a few Babe Ruth games that will go out here, so.
I think Verizon should pay for a nice little koosh ball with a wall.
Smush ball.
There you go.
You know, that's where the money could go. I mean, if you're gonna take,
When I umpired out in Stereo in the summer, that little field is packed.
oh, it is packed. We could put 100 of those in town and they'd be used.
Oh, yeah.
Could
Mike.
that go someplace on this site?
I don't know why it couldn't fit right in that area.
Well,
Take the tree.
yeah, you know why I can't? Because you'd take out a dozen trees. But otherwise it could. So if you can move those trees, here's a street view if you guys wanna. There's the concession stand. It'd tuck in back there, if you wanna look at that.
Yeah, that's a massive
You know, I don't-
evergreen right there.
I mean, personally,
I remember that.
I get that you wanna put it on the back, but no one is ever gonna use the grass on the south side, and, you know, we should look at the picture from that side, but how well would that tuck in with the trees on that side? Would it really be noticed?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have a wood fence covering up the cabinets, and your tower is gonna be visible from wherever you look, so.
I really think we're gonna hear about it if it's in that corner.
It's a cozy little place to play, and Carolyn's 100% right. The ball doesn't travel outside of that area back there, and
And
sticking
their
some
kids are safe and
thing in the
sound.
middle of that
Yeah.
thing is not the right answer. I don't think,
So other than aesthetics, is there a reason not to put it on the south side of the entrance?
Any what? Well, they're gonna they'll get their utilities where they need to get them.
But from your guys'
From our
standpoint,
point
is
of
there a reason that we would, I mean, what do you guys think?
by the aerial, and I'd have to look closer at it, but
And
it
you have a
looks like
couple
there's
spruce trees
additional trees there that would have to be removed.
Just that one. I think there's one right here, but you got a couple big spruce trees here that would help cover up. I mean, it's tough to see that corner. Do you have a street view on that, you said?
I have a street view of the alley. I can probably get a street view of the street too.
Which Jason wants to talk about those trees that are blocking when they get equipment in there.
Yeah, his are the little trees that we planted due to the development code that we had to, so, yeah.
Can we, I also don't, you know, do we have to make, we don't have to make a decision right now. Why don't we do some sort of a study, so to speak, this summer of documenting how much use it gets? There's no urgency on our part to get this thing done.
I mean, you look at so if you look at the south side of the building along 17th Avenue, I mean, no one's going in or out there, they're driving by.
Oh, right up there.
And I get you've got the two entrances
Oh, right
there, or exits
here.
there.
No, I wanna Google her, sorry, Carolyn.
Oh, Google it.
Google her.
I agree with Joe. I mean, I don't think there's any urgency. There's probably urgency on their part, but I don't want to make a 25-year decision and then baseball and other people come back to us and say, why did you do this? So I think we have time to look into
I think we have options.
other
for
options.
locations.
I like the idea of dumping some of that money into a smoosh ball field.
It's not working.
Yeah,
Plus that area in front of the concession's got picnic tables. Right
That's,
out
yep.
front where you get back.
yeah. We're in the dead of winter right now, and everybody's speculating about what life's normally like there. We're not gonna do anything right now, I
can do
don't
that.
think, if that's my opinion.
Yeah, I'd say, why don't you
And I
guys
think you
see
tell
what
them
the
there's some
options
interest.
are on the other
I don't
side?
want to table it. I just want to say we're not going to move it forward and
Right.
we want to look at it some more.
Yep.
But otherwise, you guys, it's location mainly, the terms, would you tell them
Correct.
terms are fine?
That, for me, that's what I'd say.
I think we're
It's
fine
the
with the
location.
terms.
I'd still like you guys to look into the 3%. If there's other Verizon deals that we have 3%, why
Yeah,
can't we
maybe
get
just see what
3% on
those
this
other
deal?
ones are.
And,
Seems goofy.
for the southwest one, for some reason, I think it's all tailed.
Do you want smoosh ball or super smoosh ball?
We want home run fences.
Dave, will you find out what they paid for that?
Sure.
How much
I'll
it cost that?
I'll
to
drop
do that?
Jackson and 4 of his friends off over there for 3 hours in the middle of the afternoon on a weekday in the summer.
And it,
Oh, really?
it
Oh,
could
that's
even be
all right.
with
They
or
love it.
without turf.
Yeah, it's pretty,
Like just putting up the short
They
fence
play
and
wiffle,
the
they were
baseline
9
or
last
whatever.
summer, and it's perfect size, and
And the fence, how far do you think is the fence? 120 feet?
Oh, it's not
no.
even.
No,
Smaller footprint than that?
90 maybe,
It's,
70 to 90, they hit home runs, and they're 9, so.
they hit home
With
runs. I mean,
wiffle
they-
balls.
They want them to be able to hit it over. That's part of the
it
thrill.
reminds me when I was in junior high and high school, we'd go over to an elementary school that had 8-foot basketball courts, so we could jam it and feel like we're NBA guys. All right, so, we'll table
But
that.
they, well, yeah, so just tell them, we'll get back to them when we have time, because,
Good discussion. Let's move on.
But not
to-
necessarily, not table, though. I mean, if we
That's
table
what I
it's
said.
coming back.
We'll
Yeah.
get back to
Jerry
them.
said we'll
Yeah,
table it.
okay.
when we're
Just not
ready to
take
get back to them,
action.
so
Yep.
they don't need to come back with another offer anytime soon.
Correct.
I'll let them know.
Annotate that, please. All right, now, item 9, board to consider for approval advertising for request for proposals for Fargo Park District Attorney Services, Dave Leker and Tyson Lund, presenters.
So I'll start off here, Tyson can fill in the gaps. Oh, yes, thank you. So as we talked about earlier, Greg Salvo's pending retirement. We do have services of Thad Swanson and Andy Noah right now. And in working with Greg, he said our contract is not necessarily with the actual attorney, it's with the law firm. So our two options would be to continue with Nils Law Firm, and then depending on the attorney they select would be our appointed attorney, and I'm guessing we'd have some decision in that selection. Or the other option is to open it up and for RFPs, qualifications, requests for proposals, qualifications, I get them always mixed up. Which one would it be? request for proposals for attorney services
gonna
at the
help
Park
you.
District. So, I mean, those are,
They got a conflict of interest right now.
so right now, I mean, status quo, I mean, they are our legal services firm, and we can continue with them as long as possible, or we can open it up for proposals. So those are our two options.
Do we have a policy on long-term contracts, or how often we revisit proposals, just to get an idea of the marketplace, or do we just determine at board's discretion?
Just the letter that Greg sent me, so I'll just read this. The representation of the Fargo Park District is an at-will and can be terminated by either the Nellis Law Firm or the Fargo Park District at any time. So, I mean, it's just kind of self-renewing until a time one of us decides to terminate the contract.
Do we have a standard practice with any of our contracts? That we say, you know what, after 10 years, we're gonna review and,
I've seen contracts and easements and leases that run from,
so there's no standard practice for the park district that every 10 years we get bids or every whatever period of time?
No, in fact,
We've got 3 or 5
We've
year.
been with Nillis since right before I got on, like 15, 16 years ago, and ironically, they were with a firm out of West Fargo for a couple months before that.
it was, 2003 is when Tim Davies retired. And then they did, They did-
Contract with the West Fargo
Yeah.
firm for a couple of months, and then,
it was McCullough, I think.
Yep.
And then they had some conflict with West Fargo and Fargo trying to get through the south side of West Fargo and Horace, and so he withdrew his proposal, and then they went with Greg.
so there's definitely no established timeline.
So here's just another paragraph. The status of the Nellis Law Firm is that the Park District's attorney is based on acceptance of our proposal back in 2003. The hourly rate for legal services increased a couple of years ago to $200 per hour. Over the last 3 or 4 years, payments to the Nellis Law Firm for legal services, which would have included reimbursement of costs, averaged about $32,000 per year. Greg mentioned we have provided attendance at the monthly commission meeting at a no-fee basis, so we're getting 2 attorneys today at no fee. No fee. So I don't know, Tyson, if you want to add anything?
No, I really don't have anything to add. Kind of on the timeline, if we decide to go with the RFP, we'd probably prepare it, advertise in January, February, do the interviews. March would probably be the facilities meeting, then April was when we bring it to full board.
So in my day job, our procurement office, and I work for a public agency, we have a 10-year cycle in terms of contracts, and a lot of times we'll go through an RFP and we'll have the same vendor at the end of the deal, but, the idea is, as a public agency, we, need to
Open it up.
open it up and give other opportunities. So that's the way we operate.
While
Go ahead.
we're having this conversation, and I don't know how this worked or how this even started, but would this be a time to discuss having the clerk and the attorney position? I don't know if there's a reason they're separate, if they could be one, if there's a,
Yeah, I don't have any knowledge on how that ever was established, so I don't know.
I mean, we're getting a lot of bang for our buck here with 3 of you. But is it really necessary?
Yeah, I think the
Could the
clerk is
clerk
just
part
appointed
be
by the
part of-
board, so,
Could the clerk part be part of just our attorney services? Could it all be one thing?
we could look at that.
Is that
And I think look
typical?
at the representation, school board, city commission. It does seem like it's overkill to have clerk and attorneys at our meetings.
Yeah, and this is just past history that I'm familiar with, since my dad was the director up in Grand Forks, and he was actually the clerk for the Park District, and they had their attorney, so I don't think there's anything special about having 2 legal firms, one doing each, but we can check on that.
So I know with Nillis, Greg had time and he wanted to do this, now he's gone, and I don't know, is it something that you guys want to continue, or, if we go to an RFP, are you interested in pursuing that?
I think that'd be something we'd be interested in keeping up the relationship if the board chose to go with us. We do have an attorney in our firm that can help with personnel issues, human resources. I believe you've worked with Jackie Anderson before. And we also have a few attorneys that specialize in litigation if things ever get to that point.
Yeah, I was involved with on the last RFP process with Greg and Mark Hansen and myself, I think, made the presentation. And I think the way we see it, it was just kind of a continuation of what we've done in the past. It's just really a replacement of the contact person. I know Greg did a lot of the work, but certainly he was poking his head into my office on real estate matters, Jackie Anderson on HR issues, and so I guess we would kind of still see that as going forward, the continuity that we have, and we've got quite a bit of history and knowledge of what's gone on in the past that would be of great assistance, I think, and a resource for going forward. So we definitely would be interested. I think there'd be a little bit of a transition to say, okay, who's going to be, and maybe it's a tag team where we say, hey, I'm not available, but the two of us maybe can work together as far as being here for the meetings, but then also getting it to the right person as to if it's an HR issue or a real estate matter or something else that we would kind of continue on with the past.
That's my concern. I'll preface this by saying I know nothing about law, other than, but I feel like HR and contracts are two completely different things. Is that fair enough? I mean, we're talking about, and so, but your firm has people that specialize in each of those areas?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And the only person that would be changing is Greg. For the most part, the
Yeah.
HR are the same people that Greg went to on HR issues that probably had to, he may have relayed the information, but likely had gone to Jackie Anderson or maybe Doug Higler. But yeah, that's kind of the way we've approached it. It's with all my clients. I mean, I've got
Yeah.
clients that I'm not an expert in, certainly a
Sure.
broad range, but the idea is that I may be the contact person so that if there's an issue and it's not up my alley, I get it to the right person and get the most efficient answer for it as we can.
Because I would feel comfortable that we have the firm and not necessarily a lawyer, so that if that lawyer is really good at contracts, that's great. But if we need HR and we're having an HR situation, I would prefer that we actually had somebody who's comfortable with HR speaking directly to us this time around. But again, that's just, that's more conversation amongst whether or not that's, if that, I mean, when you get a firm, I guess, I don't know who I'm asking this question to, but when you get a firm, you can get various lawyers, not necessarily just one specific lawyer?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the same thing with Tim Davis, when Tim was the main contact person, but he still had the support of the rest of the
Sure.
firm as to any specific issues that weren't, again, right up his alley or that he had to see.
Right.
Well, and I can go back, I talked about the 10-year cycle for RFPs, but at the same time, I'm thinking in my business, that's more IT stuff where, legal representation, and we've got a history, we've got a relationship, you guys know the Park District, to have to retrain a whole new legal crew, I think there's something to be said about that too. So, I mean, I don't think there's a wrong answer here. We can go either way, and I think both solutions are workable.
Did the committee recommend the RFP route? Is that what I'm reading?
No,
here? Or
Committee recommended we just move it on to further discussion. For further discussion.
I think it's more of a procurement policy issue than the our representation from the Nilles law firm. We already have a relationship, and the firm isn't firing us. Our representative is retiring. Someone else fills in. It's more or less a policy of how often do we look at who we work with and our partners in our system, and how often do we bid out
Sure.
whatever we contract out? What is our policy? That would be more my question than specifically should we go to hiring out, now that we think about it. We've had great representation, I think, all along in my limited experience. And so my question would be more, is it necessary? What is the policy? Which
So,
apparently we don't have.
based on what you're saying, one path forward would be stand back from this, develop a policy, get that in place, and then, you know, go
Exactly.
forward from there.
Right.
Because we don't have anything that's driving our decision-making right now.
No.
Correct.
We're just kind of going by instinct and,
Well, kind of board discretion, which
Board
we also
discretion.
have,
right.
but.
And the same token too, representing the taxpayers, we need to do our due diligence, and not just for this. I think this is an example. I think in every contract that we have. So maybe developing that policy, because right now it sounds like it's all over the board.
Right.
Yeah, there's nothing standard guiding them.
Yeah.
To say, hey, we've been using the same place for,
Whereas Jerry says they, every 10 years on the month, they do the RFP regardless of where they're,
which
what,
contract. and
who they're with
who
or
they know
what their
or-
happiness
yeah.
level is or
Yeah.
whatever. And you're not bound and gagged by any specific thing. And so if at the end of the day, the, you know, they're very similar, you could choose to go with the person you have the history with because that's valuable to you.
But you've been fair to the broader community by opening it up and,
Correct.
Yep.
But I like the idea that we are doing it now simply because Greg left, but that we come up with a policy and,
I'd be curious too, and take a little time and just, I mean, tell us how many contracts, I mean, what are we talking about? How many other ones do we have like this?
Well, I mean, our contracts range from, you know, contracts for interior sprinkler systems to fire extinguishers, cleaning services. I mean, I'd need help from the other directors on how many different contracts. You know, they range from, you know, 3-year contracts, self-renewing 3-year contracts, 5-year contracts. A lot of times, as he contracts, you know, somebody will call the park district and ask, you know, if they could be a bidder in some of our contracted services, and then we'll actually look back, and they've been going on for 8, 10 years, and it's like, well, maybe it's a good time to kind of revisit that and
but you know, like
see if we can get a
if you
better
had a
deal.
3-year contract, you could renew that contract for 2 more cycles, get to 9, and then that, if we're gonna go with like a 10-year cycle, at that point, then we'd need to start thinking about, you know, where do we go from here? Because that's kind of how we do the contracts that are shorter in duration.
Yeah, I mean, it gets tough when you get out in that longer-term contracts, just because, you know, the costs go up, and do you have an escalator on that? How much do they go up every year? So, you know, you probably need to be in that, at least on a lot of our contractual services, need to be in that 3 to 5 year range. Now, this is more of a longer-term thing, and I'm guessing they got an escalator on their fees, so.
Yeah, you can redo the contract, but you don't have to do an RFP. That's what I'm saying.
Right,
Gotcha.
if we have a policy in place, you know, and there usually are amounts and/or years, and so if any one of the directors needs a service, they don't have to bring it all to the board every time, it's just that it falls within the policy, and this is what's allowed, and they follow the policy.
And I think it protects us and for the
Right.
taxpayers, so it doesn't look like we're playing favorites to someone that's had a contract for 20 years and no one else has ever had a chance to bid it.
can you work with HR to come up with a proposal for that and bring it to facilities at some point?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to check with HR. I think we'd probably just have to look around and see what the other agencies do, whether it's city or school district, and, you know, get some type of a boilerplate
I
and
don't
work
know if
with.
it would be an HR as
I
much
think
as it
it's
would be a
Tyson.
procurement.
Yeah.
It's a Tyson
Okay.
issue.
Somebody, other than us sitting up here bantering about it forever and a day.
Tyson's gonna be an expert on RFPs after
Yep,
his
I go
second
with that.
year.
There you go.
I think in the past, it's been generally been based on price, dollar amount. It used to be 25,000, it just increased to 50,000. So if the contract exceeds 50,000, we're required to do an RFP. I'm thinking if it was below that threshold, we would just kind of continue as is. But,
Perfect.
yep, we'll develop a policy.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So.
I think
this
we
one-
should try to set
So I
our
guess
rate
you
though
guys
as
are
a Nillis
sticking around
firm.
for at least another month.
Yeah. We'll get the Nillis firm to write it up.
Yeah.
No
Get comfortable.
escalators.
There's no escalators and below 50,000.
And Jeff, who knows how this is all gonna play out for you, so.
So we're not tabling that one, we are just gonna get more information on it, correct? Technical?
Correct.
Okay. All right, good discussion on that one. We've got some good topics here tonight. Item 10, board to consider for approval an agreement between the City of Fargo and Fargo Park District for use of 3 city-owned lots for the purpose of single-track trails Dave Beats presenting.
Thank you, Mr. President. Commissioners, in your packet is something that may look similar to you. We've got an agreement already with the city of Fargo for issues just like this, for the same purpose, for single-track trails. This one is on South University, in between Iwan Park and Lions Conservancy Park, or directly east of our maintenance shop, our south maintenance shop down there. The Windmill House is another term that it's been given by a bunch of people. So there's 3 city lots there that the city just over the course of the last year has obtained. We'd like to enter into an agreement with them, very similar to the agreement we already have on all the blue parcels to the south on the included map. And then additionally, even on the south side of 52nd Avenue, that's the one we most recently did with Catholic Health Initiatives, the City of Fargo, and us, for the creation of single-track trails for mountain bikers, hikers, anybody that wants to get off the beaten path, so to speak. So that's what we're asking for is basically an addition to what we've already established, and this would be a new agreement for those 3 properties outlined in red. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions on the proposal? It sounds pretty straightforward. We've got similar agreements in place. We're just extending this trail system.
Correct.
Can they get to that from the trail up on top? I mean, does it connect at all? Yeah, on the walking path right now?
It doesn't, and these wouldn't necessarily connect to the improved surface trails.
Right.
It would just be an addition for the, it's a primitive trail. Basically, a single-track trail is anywhere from 18 inches to 24 inches wide. A lot of times, it's no more than just a path through through the prairie grasses and the trees and other vegetation there.
I think maybe your point, there may be a possibility for them eventually to get out to University, get over Rose Cooley, and then into the single track bike club would like to get into the WDAY property and then further north on some buyout properties.
Right.
So it'd be tough to get around there, but I think that's what they're looking to do.
Yeah.
And we could definitely have access points where people could get on there, but there wouldn't necessarily be any, established.
Design for it,
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we're looking for
Looking for a motion.
sample motion. I'll move to approve the agreement between the City of Fargo and the Fargo Park District. Wow. And the Fargo Park District to use of the 3-way city-owned lots for purposes of single-track trails as presented.
Second.
That was a tongue twister.
We have a motion and a second. Any further conversation? Jeff, pull the board.
Commissioner Popacek,
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs,
Aye.
Commissioner Deutsch,
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson,
Aye.
Commissioner Rosted.
Yes, the motion passes. Moving on to our final item, number 11, board to discuss update to Schedule B of the alcoholic beverage policy. Clay Whittlesey, presenter.
Do we purposely leave the beer for last? I mean, is that by design?
It was a late agenda item.
That was a late agenda
Oh,
item,
so,
so.
okay.
And
That's
isn't
right.
it an alcohol beverage policy, not an alcoholic beverage policy?
That's a good point.
That is
That's
very
why they
good.
put me in charge of
We're
it.
insinuating there's an issue here. Maybe it's just recreational.
The good news is we approve the order of the agenda, not the
Yeah.
exact wording of the agenda.
So commissioners, we're asking to amend the Schedule B of the alcoholic beverage policy as it pertains to limited beer sales in the Park District areas. In the years past, we've had our Frostival event at Island Park, and then downtown, and then up at Edgewood, and having the pond hockeys up there for 2 weekends. This year, we've expanded to 3 weekends of pond hockey, 1 youth, 2 adult, and then the Frostival events that will be held up there in 2 weeks. But Mr. Beats came into my office last week, and after they'd inspected the ice, which we had been keeping an eye on over the course of the winter, realized that we were not going to be able to procure the ponds in a safe manner. Basically, under a crust, there was about 6 to 8 inches of water and snow, and it was prohibitive to be able to push that away with a snowplow. Dave informed us that the water would just migrate back behind the snowplows, and they couldn't blow it with a snowblower. So, Dave, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that as far as the ice conditions up there.
Yeah, the real issue was just the thickness of the ice underneath that layer Clay talked about. it wasn't thick enough for us to safely put any sort of equipment on it. And, you know, with the cold temperatures, we were hopeful that maybe that layer that Clay described would freeze, but just, we wouldn't have enough time to get up there. It takes us about 10 to 12 days of prep time ahead of the actual event. So that's why we discussed it last week, and it just, the conditions just weren't going to improve to the point where we felt safe of putting our equipment and our folks out there in that condition.
So at that point then, Dave Beats and Dave Leker and myself, we put our heads together and kind of talked about what could be a backup plan, and we began talking about Lindenwood Park, about the possibility of building a temporary rink there. And after we've kind of talked about and discussed that, we actually not only feel that this could be a really good site, but maybe even a better site for the future history or the future of these events. So, you know, we've got better parking. We don't have to worry about bringing people down in a trailer and hockey equipment walking down there. So, again, we're asking to amend the policy tonight to offer the limited beer sales at Lindenwood Park. So this would be a permanent thing on our alcoholic beverage policy, and so then we would have the 4 events, which will be, we'll have our Frostville the first weekend, two weekends of adult pond hockey, and then 1 weekend of youth pond hockey. So
all of the Frostville events will go to Linwood, is that what you're saying?
correct, in the
Okay.
tent area, outside the tent
So
area.
where are you gonna put up the ice?
So we're looking at, you know, where the building is between, you know, where Diamonds 2 and 3, those are the 2 middle ones, where the main parking lot where we used to go in for the baseball. It would be just to the east in that field there. We'll set up 6 rinks there, and then the tent out in the grass area. So we're kind of down a little bit farther, so we've got shelter from the wind from the north and the south. So, and it, you know, seems like it'll be pretty easy to make the rinks. And I just think, you know, all the work, I mean, it's really been, it's a neat atmosphere up there, but I just think as far as the efficiencies for making the rinks and the logistics of running the tournament's going to be better in the long run. I think it'll probably become a permanent home for us if you choose to approve the beer sales tonight, because these 4 events, we've kind of spread them out and setting up the tent, taking it down, redoing the ice. It really, to do one of them or 2 of them, it's not really worth it, but when you lump all 4 of them together, it's kind of take one, take them all to do it together. And so,
I think it's gonna be great.
I do
I
too.
think it'll
Well,
be
I
a
think
neat location.
It fits in with our Lindenwood plan. We talked about having ice down there and an ice trail, so I think it's a good experiment. Are the sheets smaller than normal, or I mean, what size are the sheets? You said there'll be 6 sheets there?
Sort of 60 by 120.
Okay,
About a little under half size.
right. No, great.
And we're getting some, I think we had 8 youth teams, 10, and I had 2 phone calls yesterday. So if we can get this youth thing going, that could be really, just we can get it started and get some, you know, conversation going amongst the groups. And we had a number of meetings with them over the course of the last summer and engaged them, and hopefully they weren't going to schedule. And of course, we all know they get into hockey season, they need to schedule on some of those days. So
Can we plow with some snow and get the campgrounds open?
How many adult teams?
I don't know. I didn't look at that. I'm sorry, but.
That's all right.
All right, I'll move to amend Schedule B of our alcoholic beverage policy to include letter M, Lindenwood Park at 1701 5th Street South.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any final discussion? Jeff, pull the board.
Commissioner Popacek,
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs,
Aye.
Commissioner Deutsch,
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson,
Aye.
Commissioner Rosted.
Yes, motion passes.
Thank you.
Last item on the agenda, move to adjourn.
So moved.
Thanks, everyone.